Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studio, it's time for the GNFCC 400 Insider. Connect, build, and grow with the Greater North Fulton Chamber of Commerce.
Hello and welcome to the GNFCC 400 Insider, the monthly radio show and podcast presented by the Greater North Fulton Chamber of Commerce. I'm Kali Boatright, President and CEO of the Chamber. In today's episode, we're honored to have Alpharetta Mayor Jim Gilvin and Milton Mayor Peyton Jamison joining us. Welcome, gentlemen.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Or good morning.
Yeah, good morning. It's great to have you both here. We are excited to get started here. And of course, as a regional chamber, one of the highlights that I have is working with our 6 cities and learning more about what their leadership has successfully implemented, as well as what they have planned for the future. So this is a great opportunity for me to sit down with you gentlemen and learn a little bit more about what's coming next. But we're going to start with the past first. Before we jump into any questions about both of your thriving cities, I would love to hear more about your background and what motivated each of you to want to become mayor. Mayor Gilvin, I'm going to start with you in the city of Alpharetta first. What really inspired you to become mayor?
Well, what inspired me to run for mayor was I had been on city council for about 6 years at that point.
Yeah.
What originally got me involved in local politics was the fact that when my wife and I settled down in the Alpharetta area, I was a real estate agent. And so I was very cognizant of why people were moving into our community, what brought them to the area, why they chose Alpharetta. And it was always, number one, they came to Atlanta for a job transfer typically. And what drew them to Alpharetta was the schools and the safe community. And so I was very sensitive to that. And during the early 2000s, there was a tremendous amount of pressure for Alpharetta to evolve in a much more urban way, skyscrapers and a lot of high density residential and things like that. And so that's why I ran for council, because I thought some of the leadership in the community had lost that sense of why people came here and what brought them here in the first place. So when our previous mayor, Mayor Belle, stepped down in 2008 to run for a statewide office, I felt like we needed to have a conversation about the future of Alpharetta at that point. I ran against one of our fellow council members and pled my case for balanced growth. And so that's what led me to run.
That's wonderful. And you had a history there as city council, so it's not like it was completely out of the blue. And Mayor Jamison, the same with you. I know you were on the city council for some time before you ran for mayor. Maybe tell us a little bit about your background. We know that Mayor Gilvin was in real estate and obviously met a tremendous number of people in that capacity and really got to hear a lot from constituents. How about you and your background and what compelled you to run for mayor?
Yes. So I originally was from Roswell, Georgia. So I knew when I graduated from Auburn, I was going to come back to the North Fulton area. My wife and I drove around and we chose Milton. She opened up a small business. I had a small business. And we always enjoyed giving back and volunteering in the community. So along the way, I opened up the businesses, gave back as president of Crabapple Community Association, which was a mini chamber just for the little area. Served on the planning commission. Then I went to city council, and then I decided to run for mayor. And I just love giving back and volunteering. It is a volunteer job for the most part.
Sure, yeah.
And
Neither of you are going to get rich being mayor.
Nope.
We all know it's
all about what you give back to the community, and that's why I ran.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I think that, and you served as city council for a full term, correct?
Yes.
Yes, that's what I thought. Mayor Gilvin, you were there for several.
For city
council, yes, sir.
I served 6 years, so
6 years,
a term
yeah.
and a half
Yep.
before I ran for mayor.
I think one of the best things that I get to do is talk about the entire region, right? With 6 cities, we're constantly focused on the North Fulton region. The special part for me is how incredibly different each of the cities are within that. So it's not we have a replica of each of our cities 6 times. It couldn't be further from the truth. Each of you have incredibly different cities, cultures within that, residents, and of course your businesses. Mayor Gilvin, we'll start with you again. How would you describe Alpharetta's culture and businesses? What really makes Alpharetta thrive in that regard?
Yeah, I think what makes Alpharetta thrive is that historically Alpharetta was a very small rural area. And that was for most of its 160-year history. It was a small town. and a suburb. And then in the 80s, it started to transform with technology companies coming in and the major employment centers and great companies from around the world like AT&T and LexisNexis and AD&P. And so I think what really built our culture is we actually service that balance of both. We still retain some of that southern small town charm. It still feels not necessarily a big city. I have my cell phone on my business cards and things like that. So we've got that small town southern charm and retained that from our history, but we've also got cutting edge technology and innovation and a major employment center with over 20 million square feet of office space. So I think a lot of the communities, especially in North Fulton, do one or the other very well, but I don't know that any of the other communities have that exact blend of a great place to raise a family and build a business.
And I think you've been very intentional about that. Certainly with, if you look at your downtown area in downtown Alpharetta, it's deliberately made to look and feel very much like a small town and retains that element so that people can go with their families and play out on the green, which is one of my favorite things to sit there and watch as the kids are all throwing frisbees and throwing balls. And you're in a major city, but it doesn't feel that way because the offices that you mentioned are really on the peripheral of that. So I think you all have been very intentional, don't you think?
Absolutely. Ever since I've been mayor, I've made that my goal and vocalize it all the time is I think we want to be the best place in Georgia to build a business and raise a family.
Right.
To do both. And it's sometimes conflicting, but not really.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you're providing the basics for a good community, it serves a good business community.
Absolutely, absolutely. Peyton, Milton's a little bit different, obviously in size, but also just in its youth, right? It's a newer city. Tell us a little bit about the city of Milton and, again, how that culture was developed.
Yeah, so a little bit about what Mayor Gilvin was saying. It's smart and intentional planning. So the city of Milton had a blank slate, basically, from the very beginning when we were, born in 2006. And the prior council was very intentional on where the density was going to go, and then we were going to use that and build around it. And so we have been very smart about not allowing a lot of that density to creep in other parts of Milton. So we're intentional in our Crabapple and our Highway 9 areas, and that's where we're focusing a lot of our growth on. And we've stuck to it, and it's worked out pretty well.
It has. And you too have developed a downtown that's been created along the way, but also has that feel of strolling through a small downtown, but yet you have the ability to eat great restaurants, places that you can be entertained. And of course, you've also got a great amphitheater there. So I think that same sort of philosophy, although feels totally different than Alpharetta, which kudos to both of you to not, again, you have very different feels in each of your towns or communities, but you've balanced it very intentionally. So I think that's great. And I think, again, back to the point of each of our cities is a little bit different and would be described that way. But at this time, I think for me, having been here at the Chamber for nearly 7 years, it's one of the special things about North Fulton is the fact that all of the mayors within North Fulton really get along and work together so well. And I think part of that is that you know what you have. You're very proud and should be of your own community, but you also truly work in the best interest of not just your own city, but how it impacts and is impacted by the communities that surround you in the region. And I really see it that way. I think you assist one another in that regard. I know I see the overlap in travel patterns. We'll have residents in Milton driving to Alpharetta to the office. We have residents in Alpharetta driving to Sandy Springs. There is so much overlap in those travel patterns in and out. Additionally, not just with residents, but some of those residents own businesses in other cities as well, just nearby. And certainly, and I myself can vouch for the fact that constantly in and out of each of those communities based on hospitality and entertainment industry, all of which are thriving in these cities. But working together collectively as a region for the greater good, while also respecting the passion that you have for your own city, is not something that every region can do. So, Peyton, I'm going to ask you first what you feel has really led to that focus on working together for the greater good of the region.
You mentioned a couple things, but I'll give you a great example of what Alpharetta and Milton have done. We built a brand new public safety complex off of Highway 9, and City of Milton, we only use the courts, I think, like one or 2 days a week. And it was an empty building. And we got with Alpharetta and we're like, do y'all want to use this too as y'all's court building? So we now have a joint court building, which at the end of the day saves all the taxpayers a lot of money. And it's because of the relationships that we've been building over the years. It's interesting because Alpharetta city manager, Chris Lagerbloom, was Milton's prior city manager. And so there's been a lot of friendships and stuff that have gone a long way. And like Mayor Gilvin, Mayor Bradbury, Mayor Wilson, all of us, Mayor Paul, we always put the citizens first. Mm-hmm. And if you do that in your decision making, it ends up working out well. And so whether it's the parks and rec stuff that we have going on with Alpharetta, whether it's the public safety that we have with Alpharetta, it's working out great.
Yeah, it's an attitude of collaboration based on trust, I think, really, at the end of the day. Mayor Gilvin, what about you?
Well, I think this area is a little unique, for one, because two things, actually, geography and demographics.
Yeah.
So if you look, going back to what Peyton was saying, Milton is a relatively new city. So when I moved to the city of Alpharetta, there were only two cities up here north of the river.
That's right.
There was no Sandy Springs. There was no Johns Creek or City of Milton. There was Mountain Park.
Yeah.
I want to leave them out. But not too long ago, Alpharetta was the primary employment center up here as a city because Sandy Springs didn't exist.
It was just Roswell and Alpharetta at that time. Right? Yes.
Yeah, at that time, those were the only two incorporated cities. So Roswell had been, for more than 100 years, the commercial center.
Sure.
Because it was a developed city long before Alpharetta was and long before Georgia 400. And so we had that going for us because people who lived in what is now Milton or Johns Creek, typically they either worked in Alpharetta or Roswell or further into the city, but they went to our same schools. They went to the same restaurants in Alpharetta. Sure. Alpharetta was the de facto provider of all parks and recreation for anybody that lived up north of Roswell, because Roswell provided it for everybody down in Sandy Springs for the most part. And so I think that history of us going to the same churches, going to the same restaurants, and having the same activities brings us together naturally. I also think, going back to the demographics, as this area has grown tremendously with influx of people from all over the world, I think though there's tremendous diversity, and there, like I said, many different religions and things like that, but what brought those people to this area was the safe communities, the great schools, a wonderful business climate, and a great place to live. And so despite all the diversity, those principles are what brought us all together as a community. So naturally, the elected leaders have to follow that lead. And I think to Peyton's point, we are blessed to have good leadership right now, especially amongst our mayors, but also within our councils.
Yes.
We understand that we don't live independently. What's good for one of us, we'd love to win every economic development opportunity or every award from some ranking or something. But we know what's good for one of us is good for all of us. Going back to the participation, we're not big enough independently to have a SWAT team, so we all participate as one North Fulton SWAT team, and we have public safety cooperation throughout. I think that's just a natural thing that brings us all together.
And I know you both know because you're involved from a state perspective and see all the different nuances, but how unique that is. And I know for me as a chamber president, even going and talking at my state conferences, this is a very unique area for the reasons you mentioned, but the fact that I have the area that we have, these mayors work together so beautifully and really are collectively interested in what happens as a region is such a unique thing. Many of the chamber presidents are like, how in the world do you have that? And I think it goes back to what you very succinctly said, geography and of course the demographics. Peyton, it's funny, you mentioned you grew up in Roswell, right? So
I didn't go far.
No, you didn't, but you're still a Roswell fan. You grew up there. I think there's a lot of overlap in that regard as well, and that helps.
Oh, yeah. And every time I see the city of Alpharetta land a brand new, corporation, I'm like, go for it. Yeah. Every time, because the more their prosperity builds everybody up.
Absolutely.
And I love it.
And you get a lot of residents up there as well. It's always interesting as you look at that. We really don't do it by ourselves. Even when a business locates in Alpharetta, and they've had some great announcements, those individuals don't all live in Alpharetta. So it is definitely a greater good kind of resource. So that's wonderful. So you both mentioned that you served on city council, of course, before becoming mayor. And I know that you've been community servant leaders for a long while, longer than that. Both of you are incredibly humble. And so I know you will not brag about all the positive changes you have truly been a part of. So I'm going to ask you, not what you would say, but if your constituents were asked, what would they say is your most significant accomplishment today? So take yourself out of the equation. I know that you guys don't like to brag on what you've done, but I've seen it just even in the last 7 years. So please share. Mayor Jamison, we'll let you go first again.
Sure. So really parks, that's something that has been really near and dear to my heart. We've purchased hundreds of acres of passive parkland with our green space bond. But above that, we finally acquired another active park space. The city of Milton has grown. As Mayor Gilvin has said, families are moving to North Fulton. Mm-hmm. And we see these kids play under the lights late at night, and we need more field space. Hopefully, we're going to have a new park online in the next couple of years. We've acquired the land. Awesome. And that's what my biggest thing has been, is all about parks.
Makes sense. Absolutely. A lot of young families up here. I see more and more of it, as I alluded to, in the park area there in Alpharetta. How about you, Mayor Gilvin?
I would think that the success that our residents in our community appreciate the most is that Alpharetta has become the place that they can call home and not feel necessary to go outside of our community. And I say that because most people who haven't been to Alpharetta 15, 20 years ago don't understand that our downtown was a ghost town. When I got out of my first few city council meetings, the only restaurants that were open after a city council meeting were Hardee's, Smoke Jack, and Taco Bell.
Which one did you choose?
They're all great members, Mayor Jamison. We're not going to pick favorites here.
But I say that because it was a very sleepy downtown area. And so it was a great community, and we had all the parks and sports and things like that to keep people engaged. But if you wanted to go to a nice meal or a nice night out or take family out to do something special, you typically had to go to Roswell or into Buckhead or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
And so the way we've been able to incorporate that small town feel and rejuvenate the opportunities and the world-class amenities like Avalon and Ameris Amphitheater and things like that, make it a place where, sure, you still love to go other places, but you don't feel like you have to.
Yeah.
You don't need to leave our community for just about anything.
I certainly get a fair number of folks who come to visit me up here and want to stay for the weekend, because one day is just not enough to go see all the great things there are to do, and chef-driven restaurants. And of course, you mentioned amphitheater, which I had a great conversation with Trevor Ralph here on another show. And gosh, we could have talked for hours about all the great things that really Amerisbank Amphitheater has brought into the area and the growth that they've seen as well. So I concur, and certainly personally benefit from all of the great things that both of you have done. So I do want to say thank you, because I think there are so many significant accomplishments, but it's a great thing to show the difference between what both of you would choose. We saw a little bit of downtowns being built and parks and trails when you both joined us at the Chamber's strategic leadership visit last month. We visited Carmel and Fishers, Indiana. I think when I told everybody we were going to Indiana, I got a lot of, why Indiana? But as you both know, we compete in air quotes, right, with Carmel livability studies. We constantly are going back and forth with them as far as great places to live for a lot of the reasons that you just mentioned. We learned a lot about how both of those cities do redevelopment, trails, roundabouts. I have to point out, obviously, Milton has quite a few, Alpharetta, as well as sports, performing arts, economic development tools. And we even spent some time with Indigo in Indianapolis about bus rapid transit, which, of course, we're looking at as as we move people in and out of North Fulton in a meaningful way. I would love to know from both of you in your time there, maybe your takeaways and how these trips that we've done, and we've done several of them, have really benefited or had takeaways maybe for each of your cities. Mayor Gilvin?
So I think they're always great opportunities to go and see how other municipalities are succeeding and how you can benchmark what they're doing against what we're doing and learn from each other. So I think those trips have tremendous value just innately. But I think specifically from that trip, the thing that was most interesting to me was to see how different, even those two cities, the two that we saw were so different in the way they had evolved. And some of the same goals, but very different. Carmel, they have a very strong mayor. Politically, it's just a whole different animal in Indiana, where he basically just runs the city himself, or it was a he. And so it was interesting to see how they had tremendously expanded their borders and just actually grow the size of their community geographically, and then spent a ton of money, city funded through TIFs, what they call it, is a tax method of doing that, and bonded over $1 billion to create a city almost out of whole cloth. It was a historically small city. The demographics were very similar to a Milton and Alpharetta. The difference I saw with Alpharetta was we're an employment center, and primarily both Fishers and Carmel are a suburban community where people lived, but they worked in Indianapolis for the most part. And so they're trying to change that. And Fishers was a completely different model, much more, I think, organically like the city of Alpharetta has evolved. They've got an innovation center, and they've got they've got a tremendous mayor who grew up in that community and things like that. I learned a lot from seeing what they did, and their Performing Arts Center was just amazing.
Wasn't it? Yes. It was great to be able to see some of the unique things that folks are doing that could be aspirational or could just be something to learn from, both even in the way that they use tax dollars and funded those things. I thought it was fascinating.
And they're building a hockey arena.
They are, indeed. We got to do a hard hat tour over in Fishers of the hockey arena, which I don't know why we added that. I'm very excited about that. How about you, Mayor Jamison?
I'm all about trails and connectivity. It's interesting because Alpharetta has done such a good job of that. And Milton, as we're still a new city, we're still trying to focus on that. But I can see how if we can be better connected to Alpharetta to get our residents from Milton to the Greenway to go through Alpharetta, and if we can connect our borders even better, I think that will make both cities prosper. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I think it's a really good, again, and those two cities work well together and are working to do that. So I think that's great. And certainly those trail systems are well used all the time in both those areas, and of course here as well. All right, as we get closer to the end, I'm going to come back to what I started with, which was how you all are looking at the future of your cities. I think we've talked a little bit about the background of the cities, but also, the things that we're so proud of now that both of your cities are known for. Can you share with us what are some of the things that we have to look forward to in the future for your cities? I'm not asking you to do any super secret things, but I would love to hear your ideas of what that looks like coming forward. Mayor Jamison, we'll start with Milton.
Sure. So we are in the process of redesigning and reimagining our Highway 9 in our Deerfield area. It is something that the prior councils put that in as our most densely populated area and what needs to be redeveloped. So not to give too much history, but back in 2014 or so is when they did the zoning, but 2020 happened and COVID happened, and our high density office is just non-existent. So we're looking at listening to the community, seeing what Georgia GDOT's going to be doing with the Highway 9. So what we want is a kind of look and feel that is so unique to Milton. So people, when they walk in or when they drive through, they know they're in Milton.
Yes.
And with our new active park right there off of Deerfield, which is right there on the border with Alpharetta, we can see a lot of hopefully new live, work, play type of areas that can connect not only to Alpharetta, to 400, but to the park and to other parts of Milton. So we're looking to really reimagine that entire corridor. And we hope to have that done hopefully early part of next year.
Oh, that's fabulous. Yeah, that connection and connectivity with both of those would be great. How about you, Mayor Gilvin?
I think our number one most exciting thing, of course, is the redevelopment of the North Point corridor, mall property and all of those adjacent properties around there. So that's our most exciting opportunity. We're actively working with property owners, and we've had a lot of exciting news, but nothing really falls all together yet. There's a lot of moving pieces with a project of that scale and scope. So we're excited about that. I think the other going back to the improvements with GDOT, we're excited about having a transportation network in and through Alpharetta to match the community we have today.
That's right.
Most of our infrastructure, road infrastructure, has changed a lot in the past 5 or 10 years, but the basics were there 40 years ago for a community that didn't have Milton and Johns Creek and all the development around, much less what's happened in Alpharetta itself. So having the flex lanes, the additional capacity that people can actually get from Windward Parkway in Milton and Alpharetta, get down to North Springs Station in 8-10 minutes.
How wonderful would that be?
It's a game changer.
It is
It
indeed.
absolutely is. And so we're excited about the progress that Georgia Department of Transportation is making and how it's going to improve our east-west connectivity in Alpharetta. Better bridges, connectivity between the east side of Georgia 400 and the west side of Georgia 400. Those are two of the big ones. I would say our other opportunity that people are less aware of is going back to Peyton's comments about the office parks. So Alpharetta has over 20 million square feet of Class A office park, but much of it was built in the 80s and 90s, and the workforce has changed. What workers and employers want now has changed. So we're doing some really exciting working with some of these older office parks, like Brookside off of Old Milton Parkway. There's a Georgia State University facility there. There's office space there, and we're talking to developers about how we can incorporate, hopefully, a bigger presence from Georgia State University, as well as residential components and things that will make it more attractive to today's employers and employees.
100%. Yeah, the expectations of workers today are vastly different than they were in the 80s and 90s when those buildings came up. So you can see that in what their desire to have access to. But also, I think I love, as I continue to read more about companies calling their employees back. And so I'm seeing more and more of that too, and think that will continue. So that benefits everybody, right? The restaurants, certainly within that ecosystem, everybody, not to use the word feed, but they do feed on one another. So that's really important. All right. You have covered so much, and I know there is more that folks may want to know. I would love for you to share how our listeners can find out more about Alpharetta and Milton, and maybe something that they should do when they come visit. Mayor Gilvin, if you would share with us how people can go about finding things to do in Alpharetta, and what's one thing that they would want to do when they come that they just don't want to miss. It can be your favorite.
Just one?
Yeah, I know. It's hard.
Okay.
You can do your top three. You can do like top three if that helps.
No, I just think, first of all, Janet Rogers and our Convention and Visitors Bureau is the best way to find out what's going on every day in the city of Alpharetta, how many options, whether it's food or entertainment and all that stuff. So please go to awesomealpharetta.com. awesomealpharetta.com.
It's easy.
It is very easy.
There you go. Okay.
And of course, if you need to, you can always go to the city website for any more details or services and things like that. But I would say the top things, if you're coming to Alpharetta, you've got to go to downtown Alpharetta. You've got to go to Avalon. And if you have an opportunity, please hop on either the Alpha Loop or the Alpharetta Greenway, multi-purpose trails that are just beautiful trails.
Love to walk it during lunch. I think you've seen me out walking during lunch before in Honk. So that's always a good place to be, to take a little mind-clearing walk. Thank you. I appreciate that. How about you, Mayor Jamison?
Yes. One thing that I would do is definitely come to downtown Crabapple, enjoy beer at one of our two breweries. I support them both. And then after that, go for a walk either down Wood Road or go to Birmingham Park, which is over 100 acres of just passive parkland, which is really our true sense of Milton.
It's beautiful. And if our listeners want to reach out to Milton, they can always go to the
city website, but social media is huge for us.
Of course.
Our Facebook page, constant updates on all of our events. Just go City of Milton, Georgia on Facebook, and you'll see all of our events.
Awesome. And the good news is, if you forget any of that, you can always go on the Greater North Fulton Chamber website. We have links to both cities on our front page. So I want to thank both of my guests, both Mayor Gilvin and Mayor Jamison, for taking time out of their incredibly busy schedule for joining me today and sharing with us not just info about your city, but really your passion for your city, which is why you've both been so successful and are such a joy to work with. Thank you both.
Thank you.
I also want to congratulate you, of course, on the incredible cities that you've had a part in building, and wish you best of luck and can't wait to participate in the exciting things that you have planned for the future. As I mentioned, if you want any information about the programs, events, partnerships, and development opportunities available at the Greater North Fulton Chamber, you can always visit GNFCC.com. Until next time, I'm Kali Boatright, and this has been GNFCC 400 Insider on Business Radio X.